Well, let me give a little bit of background. I know President Trump personally for a good number of years, know Thomas Massie personally for a good number of years. If we had 537 elected officials in Washington, D.C., like Thomas Massie, a lot of the challenges we face as a country would be solved. Congressman Massie is smart as a whip. He understands public policy and the cascading effects. He's honest, he's principled. And unfortunately, we've got a president who, quite frankly, in my judgment at least, is none of those things. And so you put those two together, and politically speaking, it's like gasoline and matches. And you know how Donald Trump likes to play with matches.
Now, we're not going to beat up on Donald Trump, but Mo Brooks makes a point. I don't like that he said that Donald Trump is like, he was kind of being a little bit of insulting. But here's where I pause on Donald Trump. If we had Thomas Massie in the Oval Office, this country would change like that. Now, I'm not taking anything away from Trump because Trump is up against a juggernaut of people who just detest him. But then again, if Thomas Massie ran
they
for
would
president,
detest him too.
They would detest him too. So let's be fair to Trump. But here's what I don't like. Thomas Massie is principled. Thomas Massie does not want to add one dime to the deficit. Not one dime. Joe and Joe don't want to add one dime to the deficit. Tens of millions of people out there do not want to add one dime to the deficit. And what does Donald? He does two things, Joe, and then I'm going to throw it over to you. What does Donald Trump do? First thing is he's applauding this continuing resolution that it still has a deficit. That adds to the deficit and doesn't get to zero for 5 years after Trump is out of office. Donald, wrong. You need to drop you're telling us that Doge is finding all this money, and then you're saying that we still have to run a deficit? So I'm a little skeptical about what's coming out of your administration right now, starting to feel a little deflated. That's number one. And number two, President Trump, don't attack Thomas Massie, because if you had his ideas flowing through your administration, truly his ideas, okay, you would be a lot better off. Don't say that he needs to be primaried. He's one of the only real conservatives in the House of Representatives. Because Trump went on, Joe, I don't know if you noticed, he went on social media, or he wrote a letter, and he said that Massie needs to be primary. John Thune needs to be primary, as far as I'm concerned. John Cornyn needs to be primary. Two guys over in the Senate and others in the House. Those are the guys that need to be primary. Joe, what do you say?
Well, just to give a little background, they're talking about the spending bill. It passed the House. From what I hear, tomorrow it goes to the Senate, and the Senate, the Democratic leaders in the Senate are not, because they need 60 votes. They need some Democratic votes. They're not going to pass it. The government is going to freeze. Charles Schumer is on his soapbox. He has, all of a sudden, flipped a lot of the same policies that they were for. Same policies are moving forward. Some of them, not all of them, that are in this particular bill. He's against it because anything Donald Trump touches is poison. That's point number one. Point number two, the deficit is what's going to crush America. And it's a runaway train that both the Republicans and the Democrats have been fueling for decades. And I'm going to tell you why. Because the U.S. dollar rules. And as long as it rules, the debt doesn't mean anything. It's monopoly money. It's the dominant currency in the world. And that's what Donald Trump is betting on. He's saying it's going to continue to be the dominant currency, so I can run a deficit. Same with Biden, same with Clinton, same with Bush. And this has been going on for decades. But here's the deal. China is catching up. BRICS is getting stronger. The second that the dollar drops and gets devalued and is no longer the currency in the world, the dominant currency, it's no longer monopoly money. We have to pay up, and America goes bust. America goes broke. And that's what Thomas Massie is trying to stop from happening. He's basically saying, listen, this is not going to go on forever. The more debt that we basically take on eventually is going to sink the ship. It may not be tomorrow. It may not be 5 years from now, but it's going to happen to my grandkids. And I'm a responsible person with a conscience, and I don't want that to happen. But no one says that. Not one Republican voted against it. And frankly, the only person, Kentucky's the only state, it's Paul. Rand Paul in the Senate is clogging it up. It's not going to pass. He too is fiscally conservative.